Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. You join us on this sunny Tuesday morning where we're going to be talking about everything GA4. More importantly, we're going to be talking about how to make this transition into this new platform smooth and give you the confidence with these changes. Now, I hope everybody can hear okay and everybody's starting to filter in as we go forward. So before we kick off, let's get started with a bit of housekeeping. If you have any questions, there is a chat box in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. If you've got the questions, drop them into there. We'll do our best to make sure that we get to all of these questions. Don't worry, your questions will not be seen by others. They'll only be seen by us. There is no such thing as a silly question, so make sure you speak up. If we do run out of time today, then what we'll do is we'll aim to come back to you guys directly to make sure that you guys get your questions answered. There is also a bit of exciting part in there for you guys. There is a bit of interaction we need from you as well. So there are some polls. So again, at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see that there's a little tab for polls. Please try and take part in these. It'll help us sort of go through the webinar together and make it a little bit more interactive for you guys. So, there is also some content that will be available for download at the end, and you will receive a copy of a recording of the webinar. So don't worry about taking notes throughout. We'll be able to get you some of that information across afterwards as well. So let's get going. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Daniel. I'm the growth partner at Evo Agency. I'm joined today by Ellie, who is our head of paid search.
Hello.
Ellie is going to share a wealth of her knowledge a little bit today, and we're going to hopefully tap into that. And hopefully some of her experiences will help this change a little bit more or a little bit less scary for you. You can also see a couple of our creds on there as well to let you know you're in safe hands. But the most important one here is that we are a Google partner. So what stones are we going to be looking under today? First of all, GA4 versus Universal Analytics. What are the key differences? We're going to be shifting our mindset towards the data. We're going to cover the main pain points from GA4 and how to overcome them. GA4, what's better? We're hopefully going to be able to decode some of this interface for you. Transition to GA4. And most importantly, we're going to give you some gifts at the end in terms of some free Evo top tips. So hopefully make this sort of round off a little bit better. And finally, we're going to tackle some of your questions at the end in our Q&A. So make sure you stick around for that. So first up, I'm going to open the polls. Bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see the tab for polls open. I just kind of want to get a bit of a vibe, first of all, in the room. Where are you in your process at the moment in terms of transition to GA4? If you could give us some answers there, I'll just give it a couple of seconds to wait for those to come in. Cool. Okay, so I can already see that there are a few people that have transitioned into GA4, but you are struggling to use it. Do not panic. We've got you today. So we're going to give you a little bit of insight that hopefully will make that feel a little bit less scary. There are a few of you as well that haven't made the transition yet. Again, this will hopefully give you some confidence to be able to make that transition a little bit easier. Okay, so let's move on. Okay, so let's get going and get into some detail. Ellie, thank you again for joining me today. I really want to start by asking you the question, why GA4?
Okay, so one of the main reasons Google's upgraded from GA3 or Universal Analytics, as it's more commonly known, was for privacy reasons. So GA4 includes more privacy controls, such as cookieless measurements, and behavioral and conversion modeling, also known as consent mode. Essentially, Google has recognized that there's been a shift in user experience and behavior. And what we need to do as businesses is redefine success and use this new tool to assist.
Okay, so there has been quite a bit of change then coming through from Google, which is cool. Okay, so with that in mind, I know when we look at GA4, I can see that there are a lot of changes. What are the key differences between GA4 and Universal Analytics?
Okay, so first things first, the tracking is completely different. Within UA, it focused on sessions and page views, looking at user interactions within the pages and properties. With GA4, it looks at event-based data. So essentially, user interactions are classed as events and engagement metrics. And the main difference is that no third-party cookies are used for tracking. So data collection is totally different, which means the things that we're tracking are naturally going to be different too. And more than ever, it's become more important for brands to apply cross-platform tracking via the data streams. essentially tracing users and how they interact with your brand, whether it's on an app, on your website, or both. So GA4 pieces this together and these user journeys from start to finish, regardless of the device or the platform that they're using. And finally, they've fine-tuned their machine learning. Everybody loves AI, and improved their data modeling as well, which broadly replaces the third-party cookies. Instead, GA4 uses data matching to stitch together this data from the different sources, and gives you a much more complete picture of your users, essentially.
So again, plenty of change,
Lots of change.
which is cool to see, and amazing. Like I say, when we know that there's a lot of change at foot, it can bring a lot of challenges. As a fluent UA user yourself, how have you found, or what have you found have been the main pain points when you've been making that transition yourself?
So the main pain points for most Universal Analytics users moving to GA4, I don't want to dwell in it too much because we're all in the same boat. And what I want to highlight, you're not alone with your frustrations. Fancy Data Studio reports, for example, that you've grown so accustomed to using or you've perfected over the years might not automatically work with GA4, as there might be some non-compatible fields, for example. They've removed bounce rate and instead have introduced the engagement rate. It's not a bad thing, it's just different. And the second part that's caused a fair amount of upset is the lack of historical data being imported into GA4. It's not being transferred across, and many businesses haven't realized this.
So it's making sure that, again, your data's come across properly, you've got the right information, or you're looking at these different measures, which is cool to see. So when you log into GA4, you're presented with a whole new interface. Like anything that would change, it can be quite daunting. Now, I know if I had to make a swap between iPhone to Android, I'd lose the plot. And I'm sure a lot of you guys out there would be in the same scenario if you had to make the switch to the other. So can you help us decode this interface?
Yeah, so without this whole session turning into a guided walking tour, there are a few areas to help out here. So where you used to have the structure of account, property, and view, GA4 only has two elements, so the account and the property. Instead, they've introduced the previously mentioned data streams that represent the flow of your website or app to analytics. On the left-hand panel, there are 4 areas to look at compared to a fairly busy panel in Universal Analytics. The core areas are home, reports, explore, and advertising, which is what I use the most. Most of the information with the core elements of UA are found under the reports section, while explore is where you can create custom reports for your business, but more on that later. And then once you head into the reports, you can see areas such as acquisition, engagement, monetization, and retention, as well as your areas for demographics and tech as well. Channels are kind of being hidden away a little bit under the acquisition area. And essentially you might need to have a bit of a rummage around to find what you usually look for. Our recommendation is to create your own report under Explore, for example, if it's something that you're going to be using regularly. It's a really great feature and one to focus on maybe another time. So I could talk about it for ages, but once you've set up your account properly. And then finally, under the advertising section, you can find a snapshot of paid channels. From here, you can find some standard reports, but you can also create your custom reports as well. Providing your accounts are all linked up as they should be within the Google stack, then your costs from Google Analytics campaigns, for example, can be pulled in. You're able to create a much wider view looking at ROAS and cost per acquisition, for example, which isn't anything new, but this is where you would find it. And ultimately, in terms of where to find things, it's just worth having a look around yourself. And I know Dan you asked me previously how long it would take to get used to it. I'd say fairly quickly once you bring yourself around to using it full time and not sneak back into your Universal Analytics account. Tempting.
So you need to stay away from it, basically.
Yeah, pretend it doesn't exist
just
anymore.
get rid of it, forget about it, and then start using GA4 effectively.
It's there as backup for another couple of months.
Cool. I just want to take a quick second to remind people again, if you've got any questions as we're going through the presentation, please make sure you ask in the question box. If you have joined us a little bit later, it's down on the bottom right side of your screen. So Ellie, we know why GA4. We know the difference between GA4 and Universal Analytics. We've discovered some of the main pain points that you've come across, and we understand a little bit more about the new interface that's come through. we're now in a position that we're ready to make a switch. Could you tell us a little bit about migrating that data before we make that switch to GA4?
So setting up GA4 involves creating a property. First, check one hasn't already been created for you. Google have been doing this automatically, and it's giving people a false sense of security, thinking that it's been set up and it's all ready to go. Make sure you name it GA4 so that you can differentiate it to your old property. It sounds really obvious, but just do it. And you need to go through settings, add the data streams into the account. So in most cases, it's adding web, but you can also select iOS and Android apps if applicable. A tag will need to be added to the code of your website via Google Tag Manager or directly onto web pages via your dev team or agency. And beyond that, again, we could run an entire session on setup learnings and experiences that we've had as an agency. We've migrated hundreds of accounts and some very strange and wonderful things have come out of it, but that's probably for another time.
Absolutely. So I assume then, obviously, Google bringing in a new system, they make it super simple for us. They make sure that all of our old data from UA is there and it just does it all for us, I'm assuming.
Yeah. If only. So there are a number of ways in which to keep your old data from Universal Analytics. I believe it's going away in October. I've just seen one of the questions come through in terms of historical data being available in Universal post-July. I believe it's October, the date that it will no longer exist, but it's not going to process any new data from July. So a number of ways to keep your old data from Universal. Personally, I'd take the approach of if you need to save it all. But unless you have an entire team of data analysts that will be able to utilize that data, I would personally only save the essentials. One thing you need to be aware of is that some of the data can be sampled depending on the size of the data or the report that you're pulling. And once you've done that, it's entirely up to you how you use it and store it. There are various formats that you can download the data in: CSV, Excel, Google Sheets, PDF, etc. And finally, there is a BigQuery integration option, and essentially it's Google's cloud-based data warehouse. Great for serious data analyst champions, but I wouldn't say it's for the everyday user or business. Another paid-for option is we've come across a company called Fathom Analytics, and they're a GA migrator, and they've been doing a lot in terms of helping people store and collect that data from Universal Analytics. We're not affiliated with them yet, maybe. So that's another option.
Cool. So again, like I say, there are tools out there and there are bits to be used, make sure that what you choose to do is going to fit the purposes for your business, and make sure that the data, so we just need to be making sure that we're storing back this data that's going to work for us later. Yeah. Cool. So in your opinion, Ellie, if you had you've had the opportunity now to work with both systems, what's better about GA4?
So we've already covered the pain points, but there are a number of good things that GA4 can do that Universal didn't have the capacity for. As users, our data and privacy is in a much safer place. So that's brilliant. We can see improved data insights, and the cross-platform feature has been a game changer for those businesses with apps and websites. Personally, one of my favorite features is the search function, where you can essentially ask GA4 to display top-line data really quickly, such as showing me how much revenue we've generated this month, for example. If your boss asked you how much the website had made without you needing to have a rummage around in the system.
Now that, to me, is going to be one of the best tools.
A nice sneaky tool to make it look like you know what you're doing.
I want to look slick all the time when it comes to it, so that will really help. So that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so with all that said and done, with your views on what are your views on making this transition as smooth as it can be?
So my top tip, start using it now, immediately as your default. It's painful to do, but just do it. It's like, yeah, you just have to do it. At this stage, I would say do the essentials, do them well. And then after that, you can build out the fancy reports, for example, at a later stage.
So in other words, pull the plaster off, get stuck into making sure that you're using GA4 and just keep it, keep it simple and build out from there.
Exactly.
Cool. Okay. So what does a good setup look like, and how can we get it to work for us?
So I would say the main place to start looking at is your events, previously known as goals. It's a great opportunity to review what it is you want to measure as a business and assess what's important to you. It is worth noting that some default Universal Analytics features aren't set as default anymore, such as scroll tracking, which was really important for publishers. So check that what you want tracking is tracking. There are other features such as data retention length that have changed, basically from unlimited time to just 2 or 14 months. While these settings don't necessarily affect the standard reports, including the primary and secondary dimensions, these new settings do affect explorations and funnel reports for data privacy reasons, essentially.
Cool. Okay, so that's a really good tip for us as well, to make sure that we know that we're changing those settings and checking the settings rather than just assuming that they're set for us right.
Exactly.
Okay, so thanks for rounding up some of great advice and obviously running through those bits on GA4. So Ellie, it's quick fire time. What are your top 5 tips for smashing GA4 transition out of the park?
Okay, so tip number 1, get it set up now, avoid that data black hole. And like I previously said, just because it appears like you have GA4 doesn't mean it's set up properly. So check everything.
So don't assume.
Don't assume. Tip number 2, get events marked up as conversions. So some get auto applied as you create them. And some businesses don't want to class certain things as a conversion. So for example, a purchase would be classed as a conversion in terms of an event. But add to basket, you wouldn't necessarily want that to be tracked as a conversion, but you do want it as an event. So just check the settings. I keep saying check, but yeah, check the settings.
Again, it's that whole thing, isn't it? It's not assuming that things have been set up bang on.
Yeah, exactly. Tip number 3 is that data retention piece. So while Universal Analytics stored your data pretty much forever, in GA4, as previously mentioned, you really need to look at increasing the time for data retention settings, because their default is at 2 months. So change that to 14, and then your funnel and exploration reports will benefit as you get access to more data. Tip number 4, integrate your Search Console and Google Ads. So make sure that all the different tools are talking to one another. It's really, really important. Get everything linked up, and then you'll be able to gain a lot more information and data from doing that.
Cool. It'll give you some confidence to know that the data's right as well.
Oh, you'd hope so, yeah. And then tip number 5, ask for help. Google are actually offering free account setup sessions. I know they've been sending around an awful lot of emails, and I think banners are coming up in the profiles as well. So if you're really, really stuck, speak to a Google rep. There's a ton of online videos and tutorials on setup, for example, and then you can go into some really detailed, granular reports as well. And then if you're really stuck, shameless plug, you can always talk to us at Evo.
Thank you, Ellie, for sharing some insight with us. As we said, so I think the sort of fundamentals is, look, we've got some scary times ahead with change being thrust upon us. A lot of us are in our comfort zones in terms of how we operate UA, and having to have this change over to GA4 can be a little bit frustrating. It's very, very difficult for us to give a very detailed view specific for your business or industry, because obviously there are so many different applications across the industry. So we're trying to give a little bit of a broader format, but we hope that you've kind of found some of these parts interesting and useful. I want to hop back to the polls a little bit more now. So now we've kind of covered a few bases off, and Ellie's gone through the bits that she's gone through. Could I get you guys just to jump back on the polls and answer the questions for me of where you feel you are now? And now we've kind of gone through a little bit. If we looked in the mirror today, where are you today? So I can see that there's a few of you that have come through. One person's, again, mentioned that they're ready to make the change. That's great to see. There's a few of you that said that you still want some help. And again, this is absolutely something we're happy to help you with if you want that. Or again, like I say, you need to be asking for help right now. We're right on the time limit of being able to get this transition to go. So make sure you're not burying your head when you're getting that support. And there's a few of you that made the change and you're starting to feel a little bit more comfortable. And that's really exciting to see, because this system is great. It's just different. And I think that's key from what we're seeing, is we just need to make this transition together and talk about it as we move forward. Cool. So thank you very much for everybody that answered those. Right. We have made it. it's now time for me to take the leads off and let you guys throw your questions at Ellie. As we said, the chat box has been open at the bottom. If you've had any questions or got questions, please throw them in. If we don't get a chance to answer them today, because we've only got probably another sort of 5 or 6 minutes to go through some, we will come back to you guys directly afterwards. Or if you think of anything after the webinar, please by all means drop us an email, or you can drop us a message on LinkedIn as well, because our links will be in the videos. So before we get any further, let's put Ellie on the spot and let's throw her a few questions. So first of all, let me have a look what we've got in here. So the question we've had: how can I ensure that my data is migrated accurately?
Check everything, test absolutely everything. So whether that's doing test purchases and things like that, I would literally check every single form on the website and do it that way. We're also sending out a checklist as well, so you can go through that. So yeah, that's 100%. Like, definitely go through the essentials checklist to make sure that things are tracking properly, and test. Get peers to test. Check yourself. Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Perfect. I've just had a question actually come through. Will there be any sessions about using GA4 rather than just about setup? Absolutely. One of the things that we're looking at today is we're right on the cusp of making this change over to GA4, and there are a lot of businesses out there that still haven't made the change, or they're just really early stages in making sure they're set up properly. Our next webinar that's coming shortly, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, will address that, and we'll be going into a little bit more detail about it, but I'll save that towards the end. Another one that's got on here, I've heard that GA can now track limited information without cookie consent. How does this work for our reports? And most importantly, is it GDPR compliant?
So Google have launched something called consent mode, where essentially it dynamically changes the tag. This is all through the Google Tag Manager, where it will detect the consent given by the user via the cookie banner even. So from there, it will detect which mode they have given in terms of consent, and then from there it can adapt in terms of the data from that. So providing that you as a business are using that cookie banner responsibly in a GDPR compliant manner, then yeah, it will be following that.
Okay. Let me see, there's quite a few bits coming through, and thank you so much for everybody taking part in the questions. It's really good to get some sort of opinion back for what you guys are struggling with. So does this mean that GA4 enables you to track more users in a GDPR world because they don't have to consent to cookies to be able to follow their activity?
No, so as I've just said, they will need to be opted in via that cookie banner, and what it does is it does data modeling, and any gaps in conversion data, it uses this consent mode and data modeling AI to map where they think that the gap is between people that have opted in and people who haven't opted in. So it's certainly worth reading about, but yeah, it will be GDPR compliant, providing your banner and your business are GDPR compliant.
Cool. Another one that's come through: are big discrepancies in data between UA and GA4 common since running this simultaneously, or has something potentially gone wrong with our setup? I understand that there are some differences in metrics such as engaged users.
Yes, so essentially they're measuring two very different things. So there's the events versus the page views and things that UA used to measure on. So there are always going to be different. In terms of big discrepancies, when running simultaneously, we've launched hundreds of GA4 accounts for people, and we have seen in some cases big discrepancies in the data. We've seen some where Universal Analytics has gone through the floor and GA4's picked that up, or vice versa. We've seen some very odd things. Even though we've set things up the exact same way for hundreds of clients, there's about 5-10% that are a bit weird. But I think that's something where we could maybe have a look for you and see if there's something that we think might be wrong. Because yeah, there are obviously differences in metrics, so it's never going to add up to 100%. But if you'd feel more confident having someone check over the settings, then we'd be more than happy to do that.
Cool. Okay. So there's another one here. Did you mention that the data is only retained for 14 months instead of a lifetime record we currently use with Universal? Why is that?
It's not all data, so don't panic. You're not going to lose like forever data after 14 months. It's only the user data when you're in certain reports, so that Explore reports and a number of the other ones. So it's only once you really drill down, and that's for privacy reasons, because you probably could like pinpoint people a bit too easily if you're going too granular. So no, you're not losing all data after 14 months. It's just certain aspects of it. And yes, for privacy reasons. I hope that answered your question.
Cool. One thing I didn't mention that I just want to point out, you all would have seen a pop-up come through from Helen where there's a GA4 checklist that Ellie mentioned earlier. Just click on the link if you want that to be downloaded now. And then again, it will give you a little bit of a step-by-step guide to make sure that your current setup is working for you. Mm-hmm. And it hopefully then should give you those sort of bit of confidence that there's the fundamentals in place. We've got time for one more question, and then what I'm going to do is we'll close down from here. And as I said, again, if you've got any questions after this, then by all means reach out to us and we'll come back to you with any answers. So the last question I've got for you, Ellie, is we keep getting notices about needing to migrate still. We think we've done this already, but now doubting that. How can we make sure that this is all okay? Would you have a time if I DM'd you for some help via LinkedIn?
Right. We are all getting those notices. Even when you're logged into a GA4 account, you still get that notice that you haven't set up a GA4 account. Just what Google are doing. It's very irritating, but not as scary as that huge countdown banner on the Universal Analytics profiles. So you probably have done it. Hopefully you've done it. If not, do it. But if you think it's already been done already and you're a bit worried about whether it's set up properly, then again, we can look into that for you, or get onto one of those Google calls as well. You can arrange a setup meeting with them. And of course, you can contact us on LinkedIn or any other channel. We'd be more than happy to help out and look into it for you.
I think, yeah, you're absolutely right. Both of us are receptive to anybody reaching out to us in any format. We're here to help. Ultimately, the easier the transition and the better people make this process, the better everybody's going to be anyway. So we're more than happy to help you if you're struggling with any of that. And we have got some bits that we can use to help you on multiple formats. So I'm going to wrap the questions up there. Again, there was one of the questions that mentioned, and I'll go through it now. So finally, a huge thank you for your time today, Ellie, and allowing us to pick your brain a little bit. A couple of reminders: you are going to get a copy of the recording of the webinar sent to you, so you can use this to check your settings and obviously share with your teams. And for anybody that would like to have a little bit more of an in-depth dive back into GA4, our next webinar is going to be on the 11th of July. So make sure you sign up, make sure you get the teams involved with it, because like I say, we're going to start peeling back a few more layers and really getting into getting GA4 working. What we wanted to do was to make sure that people have made the transition, got their fundamentals in place. So next time we can start really building upon that. You're welcome to sign up and bring your teams along, as I said, and make sure you get the word out there. Thank you again for your time, and we are excited to see you on this next one. And I'd like to sort of say, finally, for you guys out there who are wondering, you've been listening to Team Evo today. We've been doing this for 15 years, and we work with some amazing brands. I'll leave it there with you guys, and I can't wait to see you on the next one. So it's a goodbye from me.
Bye from me too. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, guys. We really appreciate it. Have a great day.
Bye.